every cutting strategy explained in under 7 minutes.
Well, it's not every cutting strategy.
Well, these are the ones realistically that matter the most, excluding some obscure strategies or things that realistically people just don't do.
This is all natural. We're not even including GLP-1s, appetite suppressants, fat burners, because that creates a whole new array of variables. So this is for the average natural lifter. Calorie deficit. This is a requirement and the foundation for fat loss. It's thermodynamics. If you are in an energy deficit, meaning you are burning more calories than you're consuming, you will lose mass at a ratio of muscle and fat and water weight based on the training you're doing, the type of foods you're eating, and a plethora of other variables. If you eat above this calorie maintenance, you are in an energy surplus, meaning you will gain muscle and fat in a ratio.
To find out your calorie maintenance, you're going to have to experiment, or you can go to this website right here to get a rough idea. Whether you're in a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus, you need to make sure you're doing it in an adequate range. If your surplus is too high, you're going to gain too much fat, water. If your deficit is too low, you run the risk of losing muscle mass. When you're in a deficit, especially, you want to make sure you keep your protein high to preserve muscle mass, which is high protein dieting.
If you are strength training and you're trying to put on muscle, or you're trying to preserve muscle during a deficit, you need to be eating protein closer to 1 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. You can lower this amount to maybe 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight if you're bulking and you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are protein sparing. But if you're in a deficit, you don't have that liberty, so you need to keep the protein high.
And some of you might have heard that and said, fuck, that is way too complicated. And that's why people follow the if it fits your macros diet, which is like flexible dieting. And it's amongst the assumption that calories are calories, right? Whether you eat 2,500 calories of McDonald's or 2,500 calories of healthy food, you're going to get the same result in the end.
However, this is not true. Yes, you will still lose weight. If you're in a deficit, you'll still gain weight if you're in a surplus. However, the ratio to muscle and fat that you will lose or gain will be completely different based on the foods you're eating. Your metabolism and digestion will also change based on the foods you're eating, which is why I think the if it fits your macros approach, popularized by people like Sam Sulek, is not a good way to go if you are serious about getting results.
Especially if you are natural, because you are not going to partition the nutrients the same as someone who is on roids.
Next, we have low carb or ketogenic diets. This just essentially means reducing your carbohydrate intake to under 50 grams a day, which puts your body into a state of ketosis, which means it's using ketones for energy. Ketones are produced from eating dietary fats rather than getting glucose from the carbohydrates you're eating. Now, people do this because it is easier to lose weight when you're in a keto diet, because when you're eating carbohydrates, your body will crave more carbohydrates. At least that's my anecdotal experience. I found it a lot easier to lose weight when you're in a keto state.
However, some people don't like this diet because they claim that it hinders their training performance. I personally didn't experience this. And also the lack of glycogen as well often leaves you with a more flat, sort of unpumped physique. But I think this is extremely helpful for someone that just wants to diet quick, get it done and over with, and then go from there.
People claim it's a fad diet, but tell that to our ancient ancestors. I think it's just a good tool in our tool belt that we can utilize if we ever need to use it. This leads us to the opposite, which is low fat cutting diets. This is keeping your fat lower than 20%, which allows more room for carbohydrates, which fuels performance. This is more commonly used with guys that are on steroids. That's because fats are super beneficial for your hormone system. If we're not eating enough dietary fats, our testosterone could tank. However, if you are injecting it, you don't need those dietary fats to produce endogenous testosterone because we're injecting it. So bodybuilders will make the trade-off of fats to be able to fit more carbohydrates in their system, which they can then use for performance.
There is no real reason you would do this diet.
It just makes sense to keep everything at a moderate range.
Next, we have intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, which essentially it's in the name. You go a long period of time without eating and you shorten your eating window. So because your eating window is compressed, you simply have less time to eat food. So this is extremely beneficial on a cut.
And essentially this just helps with appetite control as well, because when you eat your first meal of the day, that sets off a timer in your brain before your next meal. However, you can actually go a lot longer before your first meal than times between those meals. Carbohydrate cycling is just a strategy of including low, medium, and high carbohydrate days in order to aid performance when we best need it. High carbohydrate days are on the days where we're training the hardest or we're trying to bring up a lacking body part. Low carbohydrate days are on rest days, and medium days for the rest of the week. This is beneficial because you're getting more energy when you most need it. And we're not eating in an excessive calorie surplus on those rest days, which also helps with insulin sensitivity, which helps with nutrient absorption and partitioning those nutrients into building muscle instead of storing fat. The main downfall of this is it is a little bit complicated, especially for beginners.
If this sounded extremely complicated, we simplify all of this in the school group, and it's why guys went from being completely confused, not knowing what to do, to making insane results in just a year. There's that first link in the description. Next, we have refeed days, which is kind of like carb cycling, except we do it on one day to replenish our glycogen stores and reverse some of the adaptations that might be happening and give your system a reset. If you're feeling super drained, not lifting at the intensity that you should be, feeling overtrained, this could be a great addition to your diet.
The only downfall to this is you're still going to be in less of a calorie deficit. However, I still think including refeed days rather than not will be more beneficial than just always being in a deficit, especially if you are in a big deficit.
Next, we have slow cutting versus aggressive cutting.
I think both can work just as well. A lot of it is personal preference, but you can't go too far on either side. If you cut too slowly, you're just too close to that maintenance line and you have no room for error. You slip up, have one cheat meal, and you're above your maintenance. It also takes a very long time to see results, and you're just dragging out a cut, which leaves less time for your gaining phase days in the year. Aggressive cutting gets it over and done with very quickly. However, you do run the risk of muscle loss and massive energy loss as you're in such a big deficit. I personally prefer an aggressive cut, and that's usually what I put my clients on, simply because if you are doing everything right elsewhere, you're keeping your protein high, you're including refeed days, you're getting your sleep in, you will not lose muscle on an aggressive cut. However, you will lose fat extremely fast, and you get that cut over and done with quickly, which I think is also better psychologically.
Then we have cardio additions on our cut, low intensity steady state or HIIT, which is high intensity interval training. Cardio in general, whether you're in a surplus or a deficit, is a great addition because you're going to be raising your calorie maintenance. And if you're in an aggressive cut and you're also walking, running, boxing, or doing any other cardio, it's going to make it so much easier.
Not only is it beneficial for fat loss and increasing your calorie maintenance, but it is unreal for your cardiovascular health, which is why you should always be doing cardio on a bulk or a cut.
Next, we have body recomposition, which is only really possible for two categories of people: beginning lifters or returning lifters. This is the idea that you can put on muscle whilst also losing fat.
Guys on steroids in their first few cycles could also potentially see a body recomposition, but as you advance in your training, it becomes less and less possible that you can body recomp. But this is great because you can simply just eat at your maintenance and see results both in muscle gain and fat loss. And I think if guys are sort of at like a skinny fat medium stage at the start, it's a very viable option.
Next, we have the carnivore diet, which is animal-based products only. So similar to keto, except you're removing some of the plant-based options.
This is literally just meat, eggs, and dairy. The main benefit of carnivore is simply the ketogenic effect. It's also very simple. It's like an elimination diet. If you're seeing problems with your diet, maybe with your gut health, or you're getting some kind of allergy, it's a great base to start from, and then to start slowly adding foods after that to see what the problem was. However, there is lots of nutritional gaps, especially if you're not eating lots of organ meats and you're simply just having like mince or chicken breast. I don't think there's a single person that could eat carnivore and like stay fat. If you want specific help with your situation, go to that first link in the description. We can help you lose weight and get shredded. You get access to us in the DMs for less than the price of an Uber Eats meal. You can also just click that button right there to start today. We'll see you inside. Peace.